Your trauma is not the event. Trauma is the feeling and the meaning that you give to an event. So an example of a trauma for me is that I was adopted. The feeling that I got from that is that I felt so alone. I felt so rejected. I felt as if I didn't belong. And the meaning that I gave that was that I wasn't worthy. And as a result of that, I used to show up in that wound in my nervous system response, which, that's what happens when we get into, when we're wounded, we have a response. So for me, so we have that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. For me, it was very much a fight response, and I would turn up in my wound, and when I say fight, I don't mean physically fight, but really fight for my right to exist, fight for my right to belong, to be loved, to feel worthy. And it meant that I was just, a lot of the time, that looked like neediness, so for example, I have two sisters in my family who adore one another. They are super, super close to one another, and they love being together, and you won't find one without the other. And actually, my mum and my aunt used to be the same way, and now my sisters are that way. And we were the only ones living in Australia at the time, and I love that for them, and I also really struggled with it. So whenever they would go and do things without me, I would become really, really, really needy. I would feel so rejected, and I would feel like they didn't want me around, they didn't love me. I felt, again, I made it mean that I wasn't worthy. And so I would show up in my wounds, and when I would show up in my wounds, because that I was in my fight response, sometimes I would just show up so devastated and so needing love and wanting to be appreciated, and I would show up just so much in that wound, and so it often meant, I remember saying to my sister, why don't you ever invite me? How come you never want me around? I feel so devastated. And she would say, you don't need to be invited. You're our sister. You don't need to be invited. And and it just went on. And I felt just so desperate. I felt so needy and so desperate. And I just so wanted to be loved. And that wound just kept showing up, So even, I was in a domestic violence relationship for 7 years. And in that relationship, I felt so unworthy. And I was so desperate to be loved. I so wanted to be accepted. I wanted to be loved, And I kept showing up in that wound and telling myself over and over and over again, you're not worthy, you're not worthy, you're not worthy. And it's really funny because even in that relationship, I would fight back, and then he would tell me that, he's the reason why, I'm the reason why he would hit me, all the things, And look, I really want to just say that I don't blame any of these people for how that played out, because I actually now on the other side of all of that stuff, and it's been years and years and years. I've been separated for 28 years, I think, or something crazy like that. And obviously I've been adopted for my whole lifetime. What my point is that original trauma just kept showing up in my life, and over again, every time I felt this feeling of rejection, or feeling alone or feeling like I didn't belong, I would turn up in that wound and make it mean that I wasn't worthy. And then me turning up in my wound meant that I felt so like rejected, and I felt so needy, and I wanted to be wanted. And so I could be quite confrontational, I could show up and be like, why don't you love me? Like, why can't you be here for me? How come, I'm always showing up for you and you don't show up for me? And why won't you show up at my Christmas, but everybody's supposed to show up at yours? And all of those kinds of things. And I was also, I'd be on my messenger, like, oh, all these reasons why you don't love me, and all these reasons why and my family, because they're not like me. Like I'm how I used to be, very, very, like, I put all my feelings on the table. Especially I have a brother who just cannot stand confrontation, so he found me really difficult to be around. I had other brothers who saw my emotion and saw my pain, and who were able to be around me and comfort me. But I had one brother in particular who just really struggled with my grief, and struggled with my pain, and struggled with that neediness, and just showing up in that wound all the time. And the thing is, I didn't recognize it. I didn't know what it was. I kept making it mean that they weren't showing up for me, and that they didn't love me. And what I really, really understand now, and this is the beauty of the healing, is that it wasn't about them. It was about me. I didn't love myself. I felt unworthy. That original wound where I had been adopted. And I even remember one of my sisters saying, you just need to get over that. You just need to get over that whole, like, you've been adopted thing. Because nobody ever felt like that. And the thing is, what I want you to understand, you can't just get over it. So, when people are like, oh, you just need to get over that. That's not a thing. And I had to really, really, I didn't even know that I had that wound, even though I would say, oh, well, I'm adopted, and but I didn't really, really understand what that meant. I didn't understand that I kept turning up in the same wound, and I kept behaving in the same way, and that the only way to really deal with that trauma was to see it for what it was, to understand it for what it was, to really, really, heal in a really deep way, and to start to show up for myself. Because that's the whole thing, is that I was expecting everybody else to show up in the world for me, my family to show up in a certain way, my relationships to show up in a certain way, even my children. I felt so rejected and so wounded. And when my children, particularly when they got older, and they started to have their own relationships, and I would feel so rejected and so wounded by them when they weren't showing up for me in the way that I felt like they should, and it was really my own wound. And when I found that wound, when I discovered the meaning that I'd given to my trauma, and when I realized that I just kept showing up in that I'm not worthy wound over and over and over, and the way that I was showing up was just so needy and so kind of off-putting and so confrontational. And also, that needy energy can be really difficult for people to be around, because it's like, show me you love me, show me you love me, show me you love me. So even though, I'm not saying that, but the energy I'm giving off is like, I need you to show me I'm worthy. I need you to show me I'm worthy. I need you to show me that you love me. And people find that really difficult to be around. And found, for me, it was coming off, really kind of confrontational, very much in my fight response. And, when I was able to heal that and find, that real genuine love and appreciation for myself, when I figured out that I was worthy, then I stopped turning up in that wound, and I was able to recognize whenever I was having those feelings, and to understand that I actually had all of the power, because I could change the meaning. So when people weren't turning up for me, I could completely change the meaning. And instead of making it mean I'm not worthy, I could make it mean whatever I want. So, it could be, what? They don't have to include me. Like, they are they're totally entitled to do their own thing. And you know what? There's lots of times when I kind of do my own thing, you know, and I'm totally okay with that. Or, you know, like this just wasn't the event for me, and I'm totally okay with it, and I'll go to the next one. When I was able to find my own worth and my own peace, it just gave me so much relief, you know, so much freedom, so much relief, so much peace, just to be okay with when I felt people weren't showing up for me. And I just stopped being a victim to my life and to people and circumstances, and allowing that to determine how I would behave or how I would react, you know. And I was able to choose the meaning that I gave to situations, and I was able to, you know, I'm able to respond versus reacting. And, you know, I don't feel that neediness anymore, that place of having to beg people, you know, even though I wasn't, you know, begging them, I knew on the inside I was so desperate to be loved, you know. And I remember crying to my husband sometimes, like, I just want them to love me. Why can't they love me? Why can't they see me? Why can't they love me? And the reason they couldn't was because I didn't love and see myself. I wasn't feeling worthy of myself. I wasn't feeling good enough to be and to receive the love. Even if they had tried, you know, and I'm sure they did in their ways, I'm sure they did, but I wasn't ready to receive it. I wasn't in a place of love. I wasn't ready to receive the love, because I didn't love myself enough. I didn't find worth in myself. I didn't find, you know, that peace within myself. And so, yeah, I guess what I really want to say to you is, it's not the trauma, it's the meaning you give the trauma. The trauma itself is just an event, and all events have no meaning, you know. They come in completely neutral, but we give them meaning. We make them mean something, and then we continue on that same cycle over and over again. And that's why it's so important that you find out, you know, what are you making your traumas mean, and then choosing to continually relive those traumas and behave in the same way. You know, I have a lot of clients who have different response. You know, sometimes the response is flight. You know, a lot of times it's flight. A lot of men choose flight. You know, you'll see that a lot, where, you know, you'll get into an argument, they become enraged and rejected, and then they leave, and the woman is feeling alone, and then they start to give that a meaning. So they're leaving me because they don't love me. You know, so we're always giving the situation a meaning, and I just want you to understand that it's not the event, it's the meaning that we give the event. And we can change that meaning, and we can heal from that meaning, and we can grow from that meaning, and we can make it mean something else. And we can also see our wounds when they show up, and when we get that feeling of, oh, I'm feeling rejected, I'm feeling lonely, I'm feeling like I'm not worthy, then we can change the story. We can change the way that we respond, and we can find that peace within ourselves. So, you know, start to notice your wounds. Start to recognize how you behave. How am I actually feeling when I show up in this way? You know, what is it that I must believe about myself to be true, that I show up in this way, you know? And see if you can just find that place. Because I'm telling you, once you figure out what your wounds are, and you start to understand that all of the worth needs to be found within you, it completely changes your vibration and your energy, and then people will be able to turn up for you in the way that you need them to. But until then, until you find that peace, and you find that worth, and you find that joy, and you find that love within yourself, until you do that, you're never going to be able to attract to you that love and that peace and that joy from other people. And it's that looking for it on the outside that you're really struggling with. And I will have more on that soon, but so you understand, just start to look at what are the beliefs you have, what are the meaning that I'm giving to each situation, and then, you know, feel empowered because you can change the meaning. That's the amazing thing about healing. So yeah, you've got this and I've got you.